Hi. So, what I want to talk with you about today is the politics of budget cuts. So, the content for the course this week covers financial management. In your textbook, you're reading about financial management, the types of budgets, the budget process, and budget cuts. And in the video materials posted this week, we cover the public management of the budget. But I want to talk about the politics of budget cuts because there's a big difference between uh, uh, public management of a budget and private management of a budget. Private companies don't have to worry as much about politics. Um, so, when it comes to public management of the budget, it's not strictly just a numbers game. And public decisions have to be made in consideration of politics, what local legislators want, and what the public wants, uh, because you're dealing with public tax dollars, and uh, uh, and some of these decisions don't come down to what the reality of the numbers show. So, besides what you read in your textbook and what you see in the videos posted for this week, you're also reading a piece about Ohio Senate Bill 5 and a newspaper article from the Sandusky Register. And so, uh, my discussion with you right now is going to deal basically with those pieces. The first is called Coalitions Are People, uh, uh, Policy Narratives and the Defeat of Ohio Senate Bill 5. This started out as my master's thesis, and then I revised it with the help of a co-author, another professor in this department, to make it into a book chapter. So you're reading the book chapter version. And some of you might remember Ohio Senate Bill 5 and the effort to restrict collective bargaining rights for public employees in the state of Ohio. This is in my research agenda: labor relations, collective bargaining policies. So the reason that it relates to the content for this week, and in a future module we'll talk about labor relations and human resource management, and we'll talk specifically about collective bargaining as a process. But today we're going to focus on this narrative about budgets. So one of the things that you have to be aware of as a public manager is that there's a perception about government, that government is inefficient, wasteful, that people who work in government make a lot of money, and have great benefits that other private sector workers don't have, um, and that is a public perception that as public managers you have to deal with when you're making a budget. And so when it came to Ohio Senate Bill 5, this bill about 10 years ago would have stripped public employees of the right to collectively bargain, and that included teachers, police officers, firefighters. In Wisconsin, a similar bill was passed that exempted firefighters and police officers from this restriction to collective bargaining, and that one actually went into effect and is still law today. Ohio Senate Bill 5 was defeated in a referendum. Now, the reason that it relates to the content for this week is that there were different arguments that you'll read about in that article on both sides of this policy debate. The people that were for restricting collective bargaining rights argued that this was a budgetary problem, that the process of collective bargaining, the power of labor unions in the public sector was putting too much strain on public budgets, and that in order to control the budget and save tax dollars, we had to restrict these rights and give management more power. Now, you may be in an interesting situation right now, just as I am as a scholar. I study public employee labor unions, but I also teach a lot of public administration, and that's labor and management not usually or not always on the same side. Not always combative, but not always on the same side. So if you're looking to get into administration, which if you're enrolled in the FIAD program, it's very likely that you are, you may currently be part of labor, and you're in the labor union. And you're going to be getting into management. And so this is a dynamic we'll discuss more later in the semester, but as a manager, you want control, you want to be able to make decisions that you think are right for the workplace, and you want to be able to make decisions as a manager that you think are going to be the most effective. And some things you have to do within the scope of the collective bargaining agreement. So a lot of times people in public management don't want to deal with labor unions because this contract restricts them in the decision making they get to do when it comes to other employment areas. It's like the principal at a school wants to be able to assign a teacher or an aide to whatever building or whatever classroom they want, because based on where they think they'll be most effective. But those kinds of working conditions are sometimes negotiated in the collective bargaining agreement, and so the principal doesn't get to always doesn't always get to make those decisions with personnel that they think they should. And the same thing happens in fire service, fire and EMS services. So as public managers, you have to work within that scope. And politicians that were for these restrictions to collective bargaining argued that they were giving public managers the tools that they needed to govern, to manage, to save the taxpayers money, and be able to provide valuable public services. And a lot of people in the public believe that. Hey, these labor unions are negotiating great benefits, pay raises, all at the taxpayer's expense. If we get rid of collective bargaining, we can be more efficient. We can spend fewer tax dollars on these services, and we can make public employees pay more for their health benefits and things like that. And so the argument for these restrictions were, we need to take away collective bargaining rights to save the budget. And that's where it ties into the material for this week, that public managers can't just operate within the numbers when it comes to budgets. And some of those perceptions, some of the perceptions about the benefits and the wages in the public sector are not necessarily based in reality. So in a lot of cases, public employee unions have taken cuts in order to help with budgetary problems in cities or states. So concessions happen at the negotiation table. And so it's not necessarily the case that the union is driving up the cost of public services. Not always, at least. Not always the case. A lot of times, the collective bargaining process can actually resolve a lot of management labor relations issues. So, these reforms were put into place to to try and save money, but it wasn't necessarily clear around that time of the Great Recession that public employees were actually driving up budget deficits for state and local governments. As a matter of fact, it was, most evidence shows that the Great Recession, high unemployment, the housing market collapse, those things hurt the local economy far more than public employee unions were. But again, the point here in our discussion today is that public managers have to operate within the political realities, and so if politicians are arguing that something is bad for public employee budgets, or I'm sorry, public budgets in some sector, then that's something that has to be dealt with when it comes to managing your budget. That there are politicians that are for or against things you're trying to do as a manager. And there were actually a lot of cases where principals and superintendents and other public managers said, no, we don't really want to take away collective bargaining. We just need some relief given this the economic realities of that time. This would have been 2011. So the argument for restricting was about budget cuts. The argument against restricting was more about fairness and the right to collectively bargain. The fact that unions weren't the driver of budget deficits at the local level, that this argument wasn't valid, was what opponents of Senate Bill 5 were saying. And so I want you to do the reading this week and think about budget management and think about the politics that surround having to manage a budget. And that you have to not just do what's effective for your area and your employees and your operations, but you have to also make city council happy, and you have to make the public happy, and so you have to be fiscally responsible but also ethical. You can't also put people's lives in danger with your budget cuts. So yeah, you can save the public a whole lot of money by just firing a whole lot of firefighters, but that's unsafe, which was also one of the arguments against Senate Bill 5, was that, look, if you take away collective bargaining rights, then police officers and firefighters can't negotiate for the number of people that have to be on duty at any given time, the number of police, having 2 police in every car, safety equipment, and training requirements, and whatever. They can't negotiate those things which make them safe, make your first responders safe, and also the public safe. In turn, so one of the arguments against Senate Bill 5 was actually that repealing these rights would be unsafe. So if you're making the purely budgetary argument, yeah, of course, we save more taxpayer dollars by having fewer firefighters or police officers on duty at any given time. But you also put people's lives in danger. So when you're doing the reading, think about that. Think about the politics that surround these budget issues, because that's the reality of being a public manager, is that you have to work within these political realities. Now, the other reading is a short reading from the Sandusky Register that caught my eye a while back, and I saved it for this course, and possibly other courses if I'm teaching in labor relations. The headline is something like local unions refuse to take pay cuts. This is during the pandemic. That the city of Sandusky, where I used to live, actually, and I'm from that area. The city of Sandusky went to the local unions and asked them to take pay cuts. Now, in the article, the public safety, police, and fire, they had just negotiated contracts, and a year earlier, so they had like 2 more years on their agreement, and they refused. This is no, we're not going to take pay cuts because of this. And one of the things I want you to notice that also involves the when you read this article, think about how this issue is framed. The article itself may be pretty even-handed in presenting both sides, but the headline is unions refuse to take pay cuts. The headline isn't city wants to renege on negotiated agreement. Because that's equally true, right? The city negotiated a contract with police and fire, and now it's their job to honor that contract, just like police and fire are going to hold up their end of that contract. But then COVID happens, and the city now wants to not honor that contract. Now, maybe that's understandably so because of the decline in revenue because of the pandemic. But that could you could equally write a headline that says city wants to shirk their responsibilities when it comes to our public safety forces. So the politics of this matter, and basically that's what I'd like you to focus on when you're doing this reading is thinking about how when it comes to budget issues, you have more to worry about in the public sector than simply do the numbers work out? Do we have the money to pay for the services? Are we operating efficiently? And ethically, of course. And those things are important. It's important to have a good, solid finances. But there's far more to it than that. So, all right. So enjoy the reading this week, and I look forward to reading the responses in the discussion board that we have going this week. And as usual, if you'd like to contact me, if you have any questions or comments, please shoot me an email. All right, thank you.